Hey everyone, welcome back to Botanic Haven, the channel all about gardening, plant care and creating beautiful green spaces both indoors and out. Whether you've got a sprawling backyard, a tiny balcony or just a few pots by the window, this is your place to learn, experiment and fall in love with growing things. Today we're diving into one of my absolute favourite topics, sweet peas in March. And not just growing them, but growing them so well that you're harvesting pods weeks before your neighbours even see their first flower. Sounds exciting, right? Let's get into it. So first, let me just say, sweet peas are one of those plants that feel almost magical. The colours, the fragrance, the way they climb and curl and fill a garden with life. But here's the thing, a lot of people don't realise. Timing and technique matter enormously with sweet peas. Most gardeners wait too long to start, plant them in the wrong conditions, and then wonder why their harvest is behind everyone else's. I've been there. In fact, the first year I really committed to sweet peas, I made almost every mistake in the book. But over the years, I've picked up some tricks that genuinely changed everything, and I'm sharing all of them with you today. March is actually a perfect time to get serious about sweet peas if you haven't already started. There's this common misconception that sweet peas are a spring-only project, something you start when the soil is already warm and the sun is strong. But the gardeners who get the earliest harvests almost always started their seeds back in autumn or, at the very latest, in late January or early February. If you're reading this in March, don't panic. You can absolutely still get a fantastic crop, especially if you're strategic. The key is to stop doing what everyone else is doing and start treating your sweet peas like the high-priority plants they deserve to be. Let me tell you about my friend Daisy. She's been growing sweet peas for about 6 years now, and for the first 4 of those years she consistently got her first pods about 3 weeks after her neighbour Oliver. Same climate, same general garden setup, roughly similar soil. She couldn't figure it out. Then she visited Oliver one March and noticed something immediately. His seedlings were already about 8 inches tall, sitting in a cool greenhouse, looking incredibly healthy and strong. She'd been starting hers on a warm windowsill in late March, thinking the warmth would speed things up. Oliver had started his in-root trainers back in early February, kept them cool and bright, and his plants had developed this incredible root system that just exploded once he transplanted them outside. That one visit changed Daisy's whole approach. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments, and if not, write 0. This way I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. The root trainer lesson is genuinely one of the most impactful things you can learn about sweet peas. Regular small pots or seed trays just don't give sweet pea roots what they need. These plants develop long, searching root systems. That's part of why they're such vigorous climbers. When you use deep root trainers, you're allowing that taproot to develop properly, which translates directly into faster, stronger growth above the soil. If you can't find root trainers, you can use toilet paper rolls filled with compost. Seriously, it sounds a bit odd, but they work brilliantly. They're biodegradable, and you can plant the whole thing directly in the ground without disturbing the roots at all. The cardboard breaks down naturally, and the roots just push right through. Now let's talk about seed preparation, because this is another area where a lot of people skip important steps. Sweet pea seeds have a relatively hard coat, and if you just pop them in compost and water them, they'll germinate eventually. But if you want to speed things up noticeably, there are 2 main approaches. The first is soaking. Put your seeds in a glass of room temperature water overnight, or for about 12 to 24 hours. You'll often see them start to swell slightly, which tells you the seed coat is softening. The second approach is scarification, gently nicking or rubbing the seed coat with a nail file or a piece of sandpaper. Just a light scratch on the side opposite the eye of the seed is enough. You're not trying to damage the seed, just create a tiny opening that lets moisture in faster. Some gardeners swear by soaking, some by scarification, some do both. I personally do both, and I find germination happens noticeably faster than when I skip these steps. Soil mix is something a lot of people underestimate too. Sweet peas are not heavy feeders in the way that, say, tomatoes are, but they do appreciate a good start. I use a mix of good quality seed compost with a small amount of added grit or perlite to improve drainage. Compacted, soggy compost is one of the fastest ways to kill sweet pea seedlings. They're prone to rotting at the base if moisture sits around the stem for too long. Good drainage is non-negotiable. I also add just a tiny pinch of slow-release fertilizer to the mix. Nothing heavy, just enough to give them a gentle boost in those early weeks. Once they're established, sweet peas can find what they need quite effectively on their own, especially if your garden soil is reasonably healthy. Temperature is one of the sneaky factors that trips people up. There's this intuition that says more warmth equals faster growth, and for a lot of plants that's basically true. But sweet peas are cool season plants. They actually prefer cooler temperatures, especially during germination and early development. If you're growing them on a warm, sunny windowsill above a radiator, you might be doing more harm than good. Ideal germination temperature is somewhere around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Cool, but not cold. A cool greenhouse, a cold frame, or even a bright but unheated spare room works much better than a warm kitchen. The cool temperature encourages strong, compact, bushy growth rather than the leggy, weak stems you get when seedlings get too warm with not quite enough light. Rose, a gardener from a small town outside Bristol, learned this lesson the hard way. She'd been starting her sweet peas on the kitchen windowsill every year because it was convenient. She could keep an eye on them, water them easily, and the family got to watch them sprout. But the kitchen was warm and the window didn't get the best light, and her seedlings always came out tall, thin, and a bit floppy. She had to stake them almost immediately, and they never quite recovered from that early stretching. One year she moved her seed trays to an unheated conservatory, and the difference was honestly dramatic. The seedlings were shorter, thicker stemmed, greener, and just looked robust in a way her previous batches never had. She harvested her first pods nearly 2 weeks earlier that year, purely from the change in germination environment. Once your seedlings are a couple of inches tall and have that first proper set of leaves, it's time to think about pinching out. This is the step here that I see so many beginner gardeners hesitate over because it feels counterintuitive. You've been nurturing this little plant and now you're going to cut off the top of it. But trust me on this one. Pinching out the growing tip when the plant has 2 pairs of leaves encourages it to put out side shoots from lower down, which gives you a bushier, more productive plant with multiple flowering stems rather than one single weak main stem. It feels a bit brutal the first time, but the results are genuinely worth it. Use clean, sharp scissors or just pinch with your fingernails, one clean snip just above that second set of leaves, and you're done. Let's talk about support structures, because sweet peas are climbers and they need something to grab onto. This sounds obvious, but the type of support matters more than people think. Sweet peas use their tendrils to wrap around thin structures. The thinner, the better. Bamboo canes, netting, twiggy branches pushed into the ground, wire mesh. All of these work well. What doesn't work as well is very smooth, thick support material because the tendrils can't grip properly. I personally love using the natural twiggy branches from trees I've pruned in winter. They look beautiful, they're free, the plants love them, and they give that lovely cottage garden aesthetic that sweet peas seem made for. Whatever you use, make sure it's in place before you plant because trying to add support after the plants are growing always risks damaging the stems. Now here's something most guides skip over: watering technique. With sweet peas, how you water matters almost as much as how often. Water deeply and infrequently rather than little and often. You want to encourage those roots to go deep into the soil looking for moisture rather than staying shallow because water is always available at the surface. Deep watering once every few days in dry weather is far better than a quick sprinkle every day. When you water deeply, you push moisture down through the soil profile and the roots follow. This makes the plant more drought-tolerant overall, which becomes really important in summer when temperatures rise and you might not always be able to water as frequently as you'd like. My friend Lucas has a big allotment and grows sweet peas every single year for cutting. He told me once that the single biggest change he ever made was switching to a soaker hose laid along the base of his sweet pea rows. Instead of watering from above, which he'd been doing for years, the soaker hose delivers water slowly right to the root zone. No wetting of the leaves or stems, which reduces the risk of fungal issues, and the roots get water exactly where they need it. He said his plants stayed healthier later into the season and he was still cutting flowers and pods when his neighbour's plants had already started to struggle and decline. Feeding is another area worth getting specific about. As I mentioned, sweet peas aren't massive feeders, but once they're in full flower and pod production, they do appreciate a regular liquid feed. Here's the key though: keep the nitrogen low and the potassium high. Nitrogen encourages leafy green growth, which is fine early on but becomes a problem when you want flowers and pods. High potassium, which you get from tomato fertilizer for example, encourages flowering. This is a trick that a lot of rose growers also use, and it applies perfectly to sweet peas. Start feeding with a tomato-type fertilizer once the plants are established outside and starting to climb, and continue every week or two through the growing season. You'll notice more flower clusters, more pods, and generally better overall performance. Something that people often overlook is deadheading, or rather the relationship between deadheading and pod production. If your goal is to harvest as many pods as possible, you need to be a little strategic here. Sweet peas, like most flowering plants, want to set seed once their flowers are pollinated. If you want the plant to keep producing flowers, you need to remove spent blooms before they develop into pods. But of course, if you want pods, you need to let some flowers stay. The trick is to choose which flowers to let develop into pods rather than letting it happen randomly. Leave the largest, healthiest looking flowers on the strongest stems. Remove all the others as soon as they fade. This way you're directing the plant's energy toward the pods you've chosen rather than having it spread itself thinly across dozens of half-developed pods. Ivy has been doing this on her allotment for years now, and she's very particular about it. She walks her sweet pea rows every second day, removing faded blooms with tiny scissors and carefully tagging the flowers she's chosen to develop into pods with little bits of coloured wool. It sounds fussy, but her pod yields are consistently earlier and larger than anyone else on the allotment. She says it takes maybe 10 minutes every couple of days, and the results more than justify the time. She's harvested mature pods by late May in some years, weeks ahead of the general allotment population. Pest management deserves a proper mention too, because there are a few culprits that can seriously set your sweet peas back if you don't keep an eye out. Slugs and snails are the most common problem in early spring, especially when young seedlings are first going out. A physical barrier like copper tape around raised beds or containers can help, as can going out after dark with a torch and removing them by hand. It's not glamorous, but it's effective and it's free. Aphids are another common issue. They tend to cluster at the growing tips and on the undersides of leaves. A strong spray of water can dislodge them, or you can use an insecticidal soap spray. Try to avoid anything that might harm beneficial insects like bees, which sweet peas need for pollination. Powdery mildew is probably the most frustrating disease issue with sweet peas, especially later in the season when conditions are warm and dry. Prevention is really the only effective strategy. Once you see it, it's hard to get rid of completely. Good air circulation around your plants, watering at the base rather than overhead, and not overcrowding your planting all help significantly. Some gardeners also do a preventative spray with a very dilute baking soda solution. Though results vary, choosing mildew-resistant varieties where possible is another layer of protection, and there are some beautiful mildew-resistant sweet peas available now that are just as pretty as the classic varieties. Speaking of varieties, let me just say a few words about choosing the right ones for early harvest. The older heritage varieties of sweet peas are often incredibly fragrant and beautiful, but many of them are long-day plants that won't start flowering until the days are quite long in early summer. If early harvest is your priority, look for varieties that are bred specifically for early flowering, often labelled as early flowering, winter flowering, or autumn sowing types. These varieties have been selected to perform earlier in the season and will give you that head start you're looking for. Varieties like Kupani are famous for fragrance and also perform well with early sowing. Matukana is another heritage variety that tends to flower earlier than many others and has incredible scent. Don't be afraid to try a few different varieties side by side and see which ones suit your particular garden conditions best. One more thing I want to mention is the value of a cold frame or a cloche if you have one. Getting your plants outside, even in March when temperatures are still unpredictable, is genuinely one of the best things you can do for them. But they need protection from hard frosts. A simple cold frame, even one you've made from old window frames and some treated timber, gives you the ability to move your plants outside in the day, let them enjoy outdoor air and natural light, and then close up at night to protect from frost. This process of gradually exposing plants to outdoor conditions is called hardening off, and it's critical for any seedlings that have been raised indoors or in a heated greenhouse. Plants that go straight from a warm indoor environment to an exposed garden bed experience shock and often set back by weeks. Take the extra time to harden off properly and you'll be rewarded with plants that settle in quickly and start growing fast from day one outside. And when it comes to planting out, don't be intimidated by imperfect weather. Sweet peas can handle a light frost once they're properly hardened off. They're tougher than they look. What they can't handle well is being coddled inside for too long. Leggy, pot-bound sweet peas that have been kept indoors past their ideal planting time often struggle more than plants that went out a little earlier in less than perfect conditions. Trust your plants. They've been evolving to handle cool spring weather for a very long time. Now here's something I want to talk about that doesn't get nearly enough attention in most sweet pea guides: soil preparation before planting out. People spend a lot of time thinking about their seedlings and not nearly enough time thinking about the bed they're going into. Sweet peas have those long, deep roots, and if the soil is compacted and hard, those roots are going to struggle. A few weeks before you plan to plant out, and in March you've still got time to do this right, dig your sweet pea bed deeply. I'm talking a full spade's depth, maybe even a bit more. Break up any compacted layers, work in some well-rotted compost or manure, and if your soil is heavy clay, add some horticultural grit to improve drainage. The compost and manure do double duty here. They improve soil structure and they slowly release nutrients over the growing season. Your sweet peas will find all of that as their roots push deeper. And the difference in plant vigor will genuinely surprise you. While you're preparing that bed, also think about position. Sweet peas want sun, ideally 6 or more hours of direct sunlight per day. They can tolerate a little light afternoon shade, especially in hot climates, but they need that morning sun to dry the dew off their leaves and get them growing energetically. North-facing positions, heavy shade from nearby trees or buildings, or spots that stay damp and dark are really not suitable. If you're working with a challenging garden where sun is limited, choose the sunniest spot available and compensate with extra attention to air circulation and drainage. Another thing worth thinking about is companion planting. Sweet peas are actually quite good neighbours to a lot of other plants, and placing them thoughtfully in your garden can benefit everyone. They're legumes, which means they fix nitrogen from the air into the soil. This enriches the soil for whatever comes after them. Growing them near brassicas that will be planted out later in the season is a classic combination that many experienced allotment holders swear by. Sweet peas also attract pollinators like bumblebees and butterflies, which benefits everything flowering nearby. And practically speaking, having climbing plants like sweet peas near lower growing vegetables or flowers creates a useful microclimate. The taller plants provide a small amount of wind protection and partial shade that some neighbouring plants actually appreciate in the heat of summer. Let me tell you something that Daisy told me after her breakthrough year with Oliver's technique. She said that once she started paying closer attention to her sweet peas, she started noticing things she'd never seen before. She noticed how the tendrils always reached out toward the light, how the plants seemed to respond within just a day or two to changes in water or feeding, how the flowers opened in sequence from the bottom of each stem upward. She said watching all of this changed her relationship with gardening altogether. It became less of a task and more of a conversation. That's such a beautiful way to think about it, and it's something I've experienced myself. The gardeners who get the best results are usually not the ones with the most expensive equipment or the biggest gardens. They're the ones who pay attention. Daily observation is genuinely one of the most powerful tools you have. I also want to say something about saving your own seed. If you let some of your pods mature fully on the plant, past the point where you'd harvest them for eating, right through to when they go brown and papery, you can collect those seeds and use them next year. Sweet peas are one of the easiest plants for seed saving because they rarely cross-pollinate with other varieties. They self-pollinate before the flower fully opens. This means if you're growing a particular variety you love, the seeds you save will reliably produce plants just like the parent. Once you've been doing this for a few years, you build up a personal seed bank of varieties that have proven themselves in your specific garden conditions. There's something deeply satisfying about that, a continuity that connects each growing season to the next. And I want to circle back to something I touched on earlier, the importance of daily attention through the whole growing season. Once your sweet peas are climbing well and starting to flower, it's tempting to step back and just enjoy them. But this is actually when your involvement matters most. Check your plants every day if you can. Look for signs of aphids before they become an infestation. Notice if any stems are getting tangled in unhelpful ways and redirect them gently. Pick any flowers you want for cutting regularly. This encourages the plant to keep producing. Keep on top of your watering in dry spells. Continue with that weekly or fortnightly liquid feed. The gardeners who walk their rows daily are always the ones who catch problems early and redirect their plants' energy most effectively. It doesn't take long. Even 5 or 10 minutes of observation and small interventions can make a real difference to the outcome of your growing season. There's one final thing I'd like to mention before I wrap up, and it's something that ties all of these individual tips together into a bigger picture. The reason early sowing, deep-rooted, cool-grown, well-supported sweet peas outperform late-sown, shallow-rooted, warm-grown ones isn't just about any single factor. It's about the compounding effect of doing many small things right. Each good decision you make builds on the previous one. Deep roots mean better water and nutrient uptake. Better water and nutrient uptake means stronger stems. Stronger stems support more flower clusters. More flower clusters give you more pod-setting opportunities. And more pod-setting opportunities combined with smart selection of which pods to let develop means an earlier and more abundant harvest. None of these individual steps is particularly difficult or expensive. The magic is in doing all of them together, consistently, with attention and care. Before I wrap up, I just want to share something Daisy said to me recently. She just finished her second best sweet pea year ever. And she said, "You know what changed everything? I stopped treating them like they were fragile. I started treating them like they were capable." That's really the mindset shift, isn't it? Give your sweet peas what they actually need. Cool temperatures to start, deep roots, consistent but not excessive water, smart feeding, good support, and a bit of your daily attention. And they will reward you in ways that feel genuinely disproportionate to the effort you've put in. That's the magic of sweet peas. So, to recap the core approach, start with deep root trainers and pre-soaked or scarified seeds. Keep your seedlings cool and bright. Pinch out early. Prepare your bed deeply with good compost, harden off properly, and get them outside as soon as the worst of the frost risk has passed. Water deeply rather than frequently. Feed with a high potassium fertilizer once they're climbing. Observe your plants daily and be strategic about which flowers you allow to develop into pods. Do all of these things and you will genuinely be harvesting pods weeks ahead of most other gardeners. Not because you did something exotic or expensive, but because you paid attention to the details that most people skip. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today here on Botanic Haven. If you try any of these techniques this March, I would absolutely love to hear how it goes for you. Drop a comment below, share a photo of your sweet peas, or just say hello. This community is one of my favorite parts of doing what I do. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video with more practical advice for making your green spaces as beautiful and productive as possible. Happy growing, everyone!